All right, I know that we're live. We're seeing some people already on here, so I'll just wait a couple more minutes and finish sharing this out before we get started. Perfect. I do see a few folks that are starting to hop on. So we'll go ahead and get started. And as you guys are starting to tune in, please do us the favor of giving me a thumbs up if you can see us fine, hear everything just terrific, and are equally as excited to get this going. Also, be sure to begin to share with us some comments or additional questions that you might have or things that come to mind along the way during our broadcast using the comment feature right underneath the video if you are watching on your phone, and then to the side if you're watching on your computer. But I'll go ahead and get started and get us kicked off. I am Juliette Abdel, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. So excited to continue to bring to you these live broadcasts. And before I go any further, I just want to take a second to thank everybody that's commented on the video that was posted the other day. I know several of you shared some memories and just nice birthday notes. Those were all heartfelt, and I totally appreciate that. And I'm just entirely grateful to the community that surrounds me. So thank you very much to the board and to everybody that commented and shared some nice remarks during my birthday, especially during COVID. It was kind of a weird time, so it was nice to see that positivity. So if you are a returning viewer, please make sure that you are hitting that share button so others in your network can see this video. Thank you for continuing to engage with us. And if you are a first-time attendee, please do not let it be the last. Hit the like button, hit the follow, or the notification alerts so you get alerted when we do go live. It saves me from sharing it out numerous times and then waiting for everybody to start hopping onto our broadcast. So I see several people on here already with us, Jeff and Brian and Peter and numerous others. I'll continue to give shout outs along the way and start pulling up the messages for you. So as most of you are aware, this video is being streamed not only here on our Facebook page, but it's also being streamed on our YouTube channel, Westminster Chamber of Commerce, where you can find all of our videos in the video section of our channel and here on our Facebook page. Of course, we are also available on all other social media platforms. So if you have Twitter and Instagram or LinkedIn, Westminster Chamber of Commerce, so you can follow us for those timely alerts that we post out, since we post different messages on different channels that we have. So I've already started pulling up those comments. Good morning message from our past chair, Brian Dice. Good morning from our chairman, Peter Brissett. And of course, Brian Head, thank you for tuning in. And Jeff, thank you for hopping onto our broadcast this morning. So for those of you that have already read the short header behind what the topic is for our broadcast, this is a piece of legislation that came to fruition. I want to say it was actually being developed over several different sessions. It finally passed through, and after it passed through, they've recently kind of populated it, provided guidelines around it. So I could think of no other than our general counsel and one of our strong chamber members, Mike Lazar, to come on here, since he is an attorney and really understands the ins and outs of a lot of things more so than I can, to provide you his insight, answer any questions, and give direction. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation we'll pull up, but we encourage you to share with us any comments that you might have or any questions that Mike does raise up along the way with his discussion. So Mike, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I'll pull up your PowerPoint onto the screen, and then we'll just go ahead and breeze right in.
All right. Thank you, Juliette. So today I'm going to be giving a presentation on the new law that Juliette was just referencing. It's the Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. We're going to focus mostly on Part 2 of the Act, which concerns transparency in pay and opportunities for advancement. You know, and again, I think it's important for employers and small businesses to stay on top of all of these new laws and regulations that are coming out, just because what we've been seeing over the course of the past year or two is a lot of new laws and regulations that impact all businesses, not just larger businesses, but all businesses within Colorado. There are no size limits to any of these new laws that have been coming out, whether it be this law that we're going to be talking about today or the Colorado Paid Family Leave and Insurance Act that I discussed in my last presentation. So just a little bit about me briefly. I'm a licensed attorney. My firm is Feldman, Nagel, Contafio & Song. I'm head of the civil litigation practice group there. And in addition to being a trial attorney and civil litigator, I also represent a number of businesses in, as their outside general counsel, basically keeping them out of trouble. One client would be the Westminster Chamber. So if you all are interested in chatting with me about what that looks like, please give me a call. The nice thing about my firm is that it is a full service firm. We provide pretty much any service that a business could need, whether it be litigation services, transactional services, collection services, and God forbid, bankruptcy services if something like that comes up. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about anything. All right, so what is the Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act? So it's codified here at Colorado Revised Statute 8-5-101 et sec. There are two different parts to it. The first part we're not going to be talking about today. We're going to be focusing on the second part, but I do want to briefly mention the first part. The first part prohibits discrimination in pay and wages on the basis of sex. So it's kind of similar to the federal EPA in that regard. But there's also another component there that's very new that prohibits employers from soliciting and seeking the wage history and compensation history of employees. I'm not going to talk about that in detail here, but I encourage all employers and businesses to take a look at this statute. It would be specifically at 8-5-102, where you can see a list of the prohibited actions, because this is a big change to the interviewing process that's taking effect this year. So make sure you guys don't run afoul of that. The second part of the law concerns new requirements for employers when hiring and promoting employees for both new and existing positions. And we're going to be focusing our time today talking about this part. So what I want to do first and foremost is I'm just going to run through the statutory scheme for the second part here. And the reason why is because it's really short. There's only 3 statutes and they're all fairly concise. So let's just take a look at them real fast, and then we'll start getting into the regulations afterwards, because that's where the rubber's going to hit the road on some of this stuff. So if we look at section 201, it states that an employer shall make reasonable efforts to announce, post, or otherwise make known all opportunities for promotion to all current employees on the same calendar day and prior to making a promotion decision. So this first subsection here has to do specifically with promotional opportunities, and we're going to be talking about those probably the most today. The second subsection states that an employer shall disclose in each posting for each job opening the hourly or salary compensation or a range of the hourly or salary compensation and a general description of all the benefits and other compensation to be offered to the hired applicant. I would say that the big takeaway from this statutory scheme is that the legislature really wants there to be sunshine and transparency in hiring decisions, promotion decisions, and compensation. So one of the things that I like to do for my clients is I like to distill everything down to kind of general rules and guidelines that are very easy for people to understand. And I would say the big takeaway here is be open and transparent with your employees. If it's something where someone has to come and ask you questions about what's going on with hiring decisions, promotion decisions, things like that, you're probably not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You need to go talk with me at that point. Let's move on to the next one. Section 202. This is a records keeping requirement. This is something that's kind of new in Colorado, where we're starting to see more records keeping requirements show up for businesses. So here it states that an employer shall keep records of job descriptions and wage rate history for each employee for the duration of the employment, plus 2 years after the end of employment, in order to determine if there is a pattern of wage discrepancy. So what this means is that you small businesses and employers need to have a special file somewhere where you're keeping track of all of your compensation decisions and that you've made for all of your employees over time, plus 2 years after any given employee leaves. I think that what this effectively means is you probably should just have one big file where you're keeping all wage history, kind of in perpetuity and just update it monthly, annually, every time you make a change to either the compensation for one of your employees or you bring on someone else.
Mike, can I interrupt you on this
Yeah,
one?
please.
I'm curious. And I want to bring some liveness to this because, when you start talking laws, I want to stay awake. So, so when
Don't
we're
blame
talking
you.
about keeping the wages for that period of time,
Yeah.
if a small business, and this often happens with smaller organizations and things like that, we end up shuffling out the different duties and responsibilities of individual people. And as a result, the wages change based alongside, or we create something based on the person that's there. In that instance, what does that look like? Do you recreate another description specifically for that? I feel like a lot of people end up shuffling around duties and responsibilities, and we equate pay and salary around what we give to that person to do.
The short answer is yes, you're going to need to. The way that I would look at this is I wouldn't focus so much on the job descriptions, although I think that for larger employers, job descriptions are going to matter more just because when you have different employees who are doing different things, they're being paid at different rates, you as the employer are going to have to justify that differential in pay, ultimately, if someone ever challenges the differential in pay. So I think that for larger employers, job descriptions are going to be more important. I think that smaller employers should have something to where they can just like to where someone who's looking at this can understand who's being hired for what. But I do think that the wage rate history and the compensation history, including all benefits and things like that, that's going to be critical for employers to maintain. And that'll be all employers, not just large employers. Okay. All right. So this is the third statute. This one's a little bit hairier than the last two that we looked at. And I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. I did highlight the first parts of the first subsection there, where it states that the director may promulgate rules for the purpose of carrying out and enforcing this particular statutory scheme. And so we're going to look at those rules here. But the big takeaway is that yes, this is all of these requirements that we're talking about today are going to be subject to government and regulatory oversight. There are going to be penalties. There's going to be an adjudicative process. I'm not going to dwell on those today, because I think that my job here is to tell employers how to avoid all that stuff. So hopefully you never have to deal with a complaint. But if it happens, just know that there are rules out there that deal with what happens. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the regulations. And before we get into detail on the regulations, I want to direct people to a couple good links here so they can see the regulations for themselves, first and foremost. That would be in that equal pay transparency rules. I'm be citing directly to those in my presentation today. Below that, you'll see an interpretive notice and formal opinion number 9. This is a paper that the state has put together for employers to look at so that they can kind of see some examples of what some of these rules mean. And they provide various illustrations in there and examples of, certain actions that do comply with the requirements that we're going to be talking about and certain actions that do not comply with the requirements that we're talking about. So I encourage everybody to go take a look at those on their own and at least have them in their records so that they can refer to them from time to time. And of course, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to provide people with a copy of this presentation so they have this at their fingertips. This slide. So this is a screenshot that I took from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment website. And the reason why I took this screenshot is because it lists all of the laws and regulations that are now on the books in Colorado, including some of the other materials that the state has put together. This is something that has been growing substantially over the course of the past couple of years, and I think that it's very important for all businesses, including very small businesses that have one employee, to take a look at this website from time to time and just see what's being created, because all of these things apply to everybody now. Well, most of them do anyway. This is really a big sea change in the state of Colorado when it comes to labor and employment regulation. There's a lot more that you have to worry about at this time. There's going to be a higher cost of compliance with these things. So, take a look at this website regularly. Just go to the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, take a look at their laws and regulations tabs, and just see what's there from time to time. And this stuff changes. Keep in mind that although I'm going to be talking about what's in effect now, it's now January 2021 when I'm giving this presentation. A year from now, there may be changes to a lot of this. So please do your homework and check on these things. All right, so where we start with every one of these types of statutes and regulatory schemes is we want to figure out, who does this apply to? So I've pulled up the most important definitions in terms of defining kind of the scope of who this who this statute applies to, and really what we're going to find is it applies to pretty much everybody. So employer means the state or any political subdivision. So these are governmental entities, and critically, every other person employing a person within the state. So that's pretty much every business. There are no limits here in terms of number of employees or revenue or anything like that. Likewise, we look at the definition of employee, and it means a person employed by an employer. And we look at employment, it means any trade, occupation, job, or position in which any person may be engaged in the service of another for wages or salary. Except, and these are the big carve-outs, household and domestic servants. So I guess these would be things like nannies, cleaning ladies, things like that. And then farm and ranch laborers as well. So those are going to be carved out as well. One of the questions that I had when I was looking at this statute is, where do independent contractors fall in here? I tend to think that independent contractors are excluded from this just because it wouldn't make sense statutory wise in terms of having promotion requirements for independent contractors. It just doesn't work that way conceptually. But I will note that unlike, say, Part 4 of Title 8, which has to do with wages and the payment of wages, there is no carve out here in the definition of employer or employee for independent contractors. So we'll just have to see what happens here in terms of how the state applies this. All right, so here's the main requirement that y'all need to be aware of when it comes to what needs to be posted as it pertains to new job openings. And again, this is citing to Rule 4.1.1 from the CDLE link that I listed earlier. So employers must disclose in writing, and that's the key word there, in writing, the hourly rate or salary compensation that is being offered, a general description of any bonuses, commissions, or other forms of compensation that are being offered for the job, and then a general description of all employment benefits that are attendant to the job. So the way that I would encourage employers to think about this is that whatever you are thinking about giving your employees, whether it be vacation time, whether it be commissions, whether it be types of bonuses or commissions, healthcare benefits, disability benefits, 401k contributions, whatever it might be, you need to list it in your job posting, everything that's there. Okay, this is very important. Everything has to be listed that could be considered a benefit to the employee for working for you. Although I'll just note here at the bottom here that they say you don't need to post benefits for minor perks. I don't know what that means, but well, I'll give you an example. So a minor perk that I have where I am is that our firm has a humidor over at the Brown Palace, and I can go over there and I can go get cigars out of the humidor. And so I would consider that to be a minor perk. Well, actually, I consider it to be a major perk, but still, I would think that for the purposes of this statute, that's a minor perk, and for the purposes of these rules here. So like access to a foosball table at the workplace or a ping pong table, minor perks, stuff like that, I think would be minor perks.
Mike, would you consider like if, and this would probably fall more in line with like restaurants or dining, fast casual, fast food. Sometimes they give like the perk of like you can have a free meal or things like that. Would you consider that as part of something that they would receive on a daily for working there, or would that be considered a minor perk since they have using it?
I'd say it's probably a minor perk because I don't think that's something that you're going to be reporting for federal tax purposes. Now, I'm not a tax attorney. I could be wrong about that, but if you're not reporting something for federal tax purposes, then it's probably not going to be something that would fall outside of being a minor perk.
Excellent. Okay? And I do have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I see Emilio on here with us. Thank you guys for hopping onto our broadcast. We have Mike Lazar with us. He is walking us through the equal pay. What are the new additions, things that we should be aware of, some important links that I've dropped into the comment section. We'll pull them up at the end of the broadcast. We do have a quick question that's come to us from Brian Head. This question asks about limitations on the range given. So he's asking, is there a limitation on the range given? For example, if the salary is between 75 to 85,000 versus 75 to 150,000.
Well, let's go to the next slide.
Oh.
So here we are. So what the rules state is that a posted compensation range may extend from the lowest to the highest pay the employer in good faith believes it might pay for the particular job. And then it also notes that an employer may ultimately pay more or less than the posted range if the posted range was the employer's good faith and reasonable estimate of the range of possible compensation at the time of the posting. All right, so what's good faith here? Really, that's going to be in the eye of the beholder. I mean, if you're looking to hire a janitor, for example, and you're putting up a six-figure salary as being a possibility for the janitor, I do think that the Colorado Department of Labor is going to look at that with a very jaundiced eye and probably has some very hard questions to ask, especially if you end up paying that janitor something more along the lines of, say, $40,000 a year as opposed to $100,000 a year. So really what we're looking at is good faith. I would say that a good guideline for employers to kind of think about here is, just think about what the industry standard is for the given position that you're posting for and advertising for. One of the things you should keep in mind is that it's not like there's not data out there in terms of what people are paid for doing what jobs. There are very detailed summaries of labor statistics that are out there for any given type of position you can imagine. And if you're posting something that's within that range, I mean, this is all readily accessible federal data, you're probably okay. If you're posting something out of that range, you still may be okay, but it may be harder for you to justify whatever it is that you're doing. I would say a good rule of thumb for employers is post a range, keep it fairly tight, and you should more often than not, in fact, you should most of the time ultimately compensate the new hire within that range, as opposed to falling outside of that range. Now, if you have good reasons for not compensating the new hire within that range, I mean, we can talk about that. And you certainly have a defense there, but just, make sure that whatever you do is actually in good faith. If you're doing something where you feel like you're intentionally trying to bend the rules, there's probably a good chance that the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment will also conclude that you were trying to bend the rules and punish you for it. Okay? So I think that should answer that. And the one thing that I'll note here is that these particular requirements regarding transparency in compensation levels, they apply to not just job postings, but they're going to apply to promotion postings, which we're going to be talking about next too. Okay, so always make sure that you provide detailed descriptions of compensation for not just new hires, but for promotional opportunities. Okay. So let's move on to the new job posting requirements, at least in terms of the geographical requirements. So for new job posting requirements and what we're talking about today, these requirements do not apply to either jobs that are going to be performed entirely outside of Colorado or to postings that are made outside of Colorado. Okay. So if you make this, so let's say that you're a large employer, and you have an office both in Denver and you have one in, say, Boston. If you make a post in the break room in Boston, then these requirements do not apply. Okay. But if you make the post to the employees, say here in Colorado, then at the Denver office, then yes, they're going to apply.
Oh, interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
I do think that this is a little bit tricky, though. I can see arguments where, if you tell employees in different states different things as opposed to what you're telling the employees here in this state, that could cause problems for you. I would say the best practice is just be open to everybody and not worry about it, as opposed to trying to get cute with this. But, the law says what the law says. Okay.
So to interrupt you, so if I am an employer that, for example, decides to do some hiring on different college campuses, and so I'm in different states and I'm at those job fairs and promoting it out to those students, I have those recruiters and things like that. They would not necessarily have to say everything that we have to post out here, but it would probably be a good idea that they do for consistency.
Correct. I think that that's the best practice here. Okay. And again, one of the things that I'll note, and I think this came up during the family leave presentation that I did previously, is that if we look at the trajectory that Colorado's on with regards to its labor and employment regulations, it's very closely mirroring California at this point. I mean, we're going down that path. And I think what we're seeing nationally is that California is kind of leading the way with regards to a lot of these new regulatory schemes that are popping up, and California is kind of becoming a bit of a new national standard. And that's really kind of a function of the predominance of the tech industry more than anything else. Okay. So for promotion postings and the requirements that we'll be talking about here shortly, those requirements do not apply to employees who work entirely outside of Colorado or will be working entirely outside of Colorado. So again, let's say that you're going to be, let's say you're a big business, you have an office in Boston and Denver again, you're looking to promote somebody to a new position in Boston. Well, I think that what this regulation says is that you can make a post in Colorado at your Denver office for that new Boston position, or I should say, for that promotional Boston position, and you do not have to comply with these requirements in that case. All right. So what are we talking about when we're talking about a promotional opportunity? So a promotional opportunity exists when an employer has or anticipates a vacancy in an existing or new position that could be considered a promotion for one or more employees in terms of compensation, benefits, status, duties, or access to further advancement. I want to focus everyone's attention here on that last phrase there in terms of compensation, benefits, status, duties, or access to further advancement. That's an incredibly broad statement there. Basically, what the Department of Labor is saying is that pretty much almost anything that could be construed as an improvement to the employee's position could be considered a promotional opportunity. Like it's not just about title. It's not just about what they're being paid. It could be benefits, but it's also status. And I don't even know what status means here, but let's say that you're put into a position where it kind of seems like you're in charge of a team at this point, as opposed to not being in charge of a team. I would say that's probably an improvement in status, and perhaps certainly an improvement in duties. If we're looking at this last phrase, access to further advancement, I'm not entirely sure what that could mean, but it could mean a lot of different things. Let's say that your job doesn't really change, but all of a sudden it seems like you're being teed up to be promoted to some kind of manager later on. Well, I would say that may be a change or a promotion to a new level now, where you now have access to further advancement. So again, what I would stress that employers be careful of here is that promotional opportunities can mean a lot of different things, and it's going to be very easy to promote somebody without really thinking that you're promoting somebody.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know. And I think that goes back to that initial question from earlier on, Mike, about, if somebody, if their duties change and how that's affected. I think that captures that pretty well. I also have Counselor Voles on here. I see him, so I just wanted to give him some love, but carry on.
Okay. All right. So what are the requirements for posting employee promotions? So an employer is required to make, quote unquote, reasonable efforts to announce, post, or otherwise make known all opportunities for promotion to all current employees on the same calendar day and prior to making a promotion decision. So what this means basically is that if you're going to be, if you're an employer and you're thinking about promoting somebody within the organization, you need to make a post or make a publication of this opportunity to everybody within your organization on the same day. And I want to stress the all employees part here. And we're going to see this made clear later on. There is no hedge for qualifications. Whenever there's an opportunity for an employee to be promoted, everyone has to know about it and learn about it at the same time, even employees who would never be considered for that promotion because they're not qualified for it. So let's say that you are you're a business and you have let's say you're an electrician business and you have secretaries, you have various types of electricians there, you have an HR department, you have and then above that you have like kind of like a managerial position, and that just opened up, and so now you as the employer are considering promoting someone to go be that manager. And let's say that you as the employer are pretty sure that you're going to hire someone out of the HR department to go do that. I mean, you're certainly not going to hire the secretary. You may hire one of the electricians, one of the actual technicians to go be this manager. You are obliged in making in advertising this promotional opportunity to let everybody know about the promotional opportunity. That includes the secretaries whom are not going to be hired. So just bear in mind of that. And you have to let them know all at the same time too. It's the same calendar day. Okay. Last thing that I want to stress here is reasonable efforts. So what the statute does not say, or I should say what the rules do not say, is that you have to make a post, say, 1 week before making the decision or 2 weeks before making the decision. The rules are going to leave that up to the employer to kind of determine the timing here. And the guidance that's being given is reasonable efforts. Okay, so you have to give a reasonable amount of time prior to making the decision to at least notify everybody the decision is going to be made at some point. All right. So in terms of what's required in a promotional opportunity posting, so we need to have 3 basic things: job title, compensation and benefits, and a means by which the employees will apply for the position. And again, I want to stress for that section B there, that compensation and benefits, these are going to be the same requirements for job postings that we were looking at earlier. So, please refer back to those particular rules and or statutes. All right, so let's talk about reasonable efforts a little bit more. So an employer makes reasonable efforts with any methods by which all covered employees can access within their regular workplace, either online or in hard copy, and B, are told where to find required postings or announcements. And so this is how you make reasonable efforts with regards to posting promotional opportunities. And I think the key sentence here is the second one. If a particular method reaches some but not all employees, such as online posting not accessible to those lacking internet access, then an alternative method shall be used for such employees. Here's the way that I would look at this requirement if I was an employer. If you have all of your employees on email, like they all have employer provided email access, if you just send out an email to everybody about this promotional opportunity, you're good. That's all you need to do. If everyone does not have email, then you have to think about doing this some other way. And that may be by doing something like making the posting in a break room, for example. I mean, historically, employers have kept job boards and things like that in the most public areas. Well, I shouldn't say public areas, but like in the areas where the employees are most likely to congregate, so like in break rooms or kitchens and things like that. And that's typically okay. But I would say email postings are best just because email is something that's very easily preserved and it's a very easy record to keep and track. So I would encourage people to do things that way if possible. You can also do online postings. I would think that one of the things you can do is you can just send an email to everybody saying, hey, here's a list of all the promotional opportunities this week. And in that email, it just has a link to a particular web page on your website. I think that's probably good too. So again, I want to stress here, employers must notify all employees of all promotional opportunities and may not limit notice to those employees it deems qualified for the position. So again, I want to stress, every employee has to be notified of every promotional opportunity. Very important here. And again, the employer can ultimately reject applicants on the basis of them not being qualified. So that decision power is not being taken away. You just have to give notice regardless. Now, there are some exceptions where you do not have to comply with these requirements and make these postings. The first one that we're going to talk about is confidentiality, or in cases requiring confidentiality. So a promotional opportunity need not be posted to all employees if the employer has a compelling need to keep a particular opening confidential because the position is still being held by an incumbent employee who, for reasons other than avoiding job posting requirements, the employer is not yet made aware they will be separated. Okay, so this is one safe harbor provision here where employers do not need to make the promotional posting. Let's say that you're an employer and you're getting ready to fire one of your senior managers or a VP or something like that, but you don't really want that person to know it yet until you have someone else lined up. I would argue that you can probably, well, you can avail yourself here of this particular safe harbor to not advertise the promotional opportunity. Again, make sure that you have a very compelling need for doing this. It says compelling need here. I don't know exactly how the Department of Labor is going to interpret that ultimately, but it says compelling need, which means it's not just one of those, I'd like to keep this confidential for the time being. It has to be something more along the lines of, I need to keep this confidential for the time for the time being, for some, particular business related purpose. Okay. I do want to note here that this exception can fall apart very quickly here if we look at the bottom half of this particular paragraph. First of all, if any employees are being told about this particular opportunity popping up, then all of those employees who have substantially similar jobs have to be told of that. So the way that I would look at it is, let's say that you have, you're getting ready to axe a VP, as I mentioned earlier. I would say that as the employer, you could probably tell the other VPs that this is about to happen and limit disclosure to them about this. But to the extent that you start going below that level, then that may start causing problems and start opening you up to having to make further disclosure beyond where you otherwise may want to go do that. And then regardless, if the need for the confidentiality ever disappears, then you have to make the posting at that point. And that's made very clear in the last sentence. So the next big carve out here for promotional postings in terms of when employers don't have to do it is when there's something that's in writing stating that an employee will be automatically entitled to a promotion within a year of the employee being hired. And I think the key elements here are what I have made bold and underlined within this paragraph. There has to be an actual written representation here that the employee will be promoted after a certain amount of time based upon new experience or meeting certain thresholds or other criteria. And then there's also a time limit here, and so this promotion has to happen within 1 year of the person being hired. So a good example of this would be, let's say a restaurant hires a new sous chef, for example. What the restaurant may do is put in the offer letter that the sous chef will automatically get a higher rate of pay, a raise, within 6 months after being hired, if they meet certain criteria, whatever those might be. So if we're talking about that kind of promotion, then you don't need to make a posting at that point for it. Okay. Another good example of that would be if employers have employee handbooks, and the employee handbooks state that employees, as a matter of policy, will be eligible for promotions upon hitting certain thresholds or other criteria. I think that those are automatically deemed as being postings already, so you don't have to worry about making separate promotional postings in those instances either. And the last exception would be for temporary hires. So if someone is promoted on a temporary basis to cover a position, but the position is not expected to be permanent, then you do not need to comply with these requirements. But again, note this last sentence here is that if the hire may become permanent, the required promotion posting must be made in time for other employees to apply for the permanent position. All right, so let's get to the fun part, and we're not going to dwell on this. So what happens when an employer messes up here? So suspected violations, including retaliation for violations, can be reported to the division. And just so you know, retaliation is a term of art here. So let's say someone complains to an employer that they're violating the requirements of this particular law, and they just make the complaint directly to the employer, saying, "Hey, boss, you need to do this, that, or the other because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing here." If the boss turns around and punishes the employee for raising that red flag, then the employer is going to get in trouble at that point. So that's what retaliation is. So once the report is made, then the division can order the employer to either undertake actions to bring itself into compliance and remedy the violation, and it can also fine the employer anywhere from $500 to $10,000 for each violation of the law. So what should employers do now? I mean, first and foremost, I think you need to hire all hiring and promotion procedures to ensure compliance with this. And again, I want to stress here that this is a new world in Colorado. Small businesses are not off the hook. They're also liable and responsible for complying with all of these requirements that I've run through today. I think that all employers need to update their employee handbooks. I think it's more important than ever that all employers have employee handbooks. I think gone are the days when you can go without them at this point within the state. I just think you're asking for trouble if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's and have all the appropriate paperwork in place. And lastly, just call an attorney if you have questions. I mean, I'm here. People can get a hold of me. I left my email at on the front slide. Certainly reach out to Juliet. Hit me on Facebook. You know where to find me. And that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I think you have done probably the most succinct job you can in explaining this rather large new guidance that we have, a new piece of legislation. I know you referenced a lot of links. I did my best to copy a couple of them, included them as well into this broadcast for anyone that was interested in the early on. Mike had referenced a couple of different websites for you to stay on top of things as they continually may change between what we've just shared today and anything else that might continue to come out. The PowerPoint is available if you would like, and just be sure that you either comment on this video or you email us or direct message us, and we'll email you the details of what that is. Mike, if people have any questions that they want to directly connect with you on and may not be comfortable to either type it out or let us know, but want to touch base with you, is there an email or phone number that I can just quickly drop in for them?
Sure. My email address is mlazar@fncslaw.com. So that'd be Frank, Nancy, Charlie, Sally, LAW.com. And then a good phone number to reach me at would be the regular office phone number. So that'd be 303-813-1200. You forgot the S in there on the email address. FNCS. It was FNC Law a while ago.
You guys are constantly
happens
whenever you get some egos in there, you start slapping on last names. So I will fix that so everyone has access to your right email, and the phone number to reach Mike is directly also included if you would like to discuss with him anything in private and are not comfortable either sharing it on here. I also see with us Sheriff Feigenborn. Thank you so much for being on this broadcast with us and tuning in. It is a lot of great information because it does affect everybody. It's not just our business community that's affected by this, and so it's valuable to know, especially whenever you have organizations, different agencies that have various levels of promotions and merit-based and things like that. This would affect you very greatly. So thank you so much for tuning into the broadcast. We will be back here on Monday with our broadcast with the mayor. So please be sure to bring any comments or questions to that. We have a full week that's planned out, and we're picking back up on our live broadcasts. And then we will conclude out the week next week with sharing updates on what's going on with the chamber, what does 2021 look like, and things you can start marking on your calendar, programs and services that are available to you. But I thank you so much for watching this video. If you end up watching it on replay, please give us that hashtag replay so we know you tuned in at a later point in time. And then if you were with us along the way, I do appreciate you staying through this presentation, because it was one of those that's incredibly informative, and I just found so much value. So Mike, I know you continue to be busy even outside of COVID. With COVID, you guys have been slammed with a number of things. So just know that I value not only your partnership with our organization, but you making sure that you can prep for this and really come on here and explain it as thoroughly as possible for our business community.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. So have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy it. And I hope everyone has a blessed weekend. Thank you.